vessels in the eye which are seen superficially, it could be either the conjunctival blood vessels or your ciliary episcleral blood vessels. So we will divide this. The causes of red eye as either due to the conjunctiva or cornea or sclera, or it could be due to the iris and ciliary body, eyelids, or the orbit. So basically, the red eye can be because of any of these causes. We'll deal with each one of them, and as we deal with them, we'll be able to differentiate the causes of the red eye. The symptoms in a case could be associated with discharge or itching or pain, photophobia, and visual loss. We have to look particularly for the associated symptoms so that we are able to come to a particular diagnosis. And these are the signs of the red eye which can be associated. Any of these signs can be associated, and each one of these signs will help us to go to somewhere in the diagnosis. First thing is, if you see any vesicles over the skin lids is seen mostly in herpetic lesions. Any herpes lesions can cause vesicles over the lid. So if you're seeing any vesicles, you can go in favor of herpes lesions and look for the typical lesions within the eye. Now, if you're seeing follicles, the follicles are seen mostly in case of viral etiology, viral conjunctivitis or anything. In the conjunctiva, follicles are seen because of the viral reaction. Now, if you see the ciliary flush, that is a ciliary congestion, it can be due to any cause like the corneal ulcer or the iridocyclitis. Each one of this we'll see later. If you're seeing an irregular pupil, like a stone pupil, all of you know it can be seen in the case of iridocyclitis. If you're seeing flat top lesions in the conjunctiva, which are papillae, these are more commonly seen in allergic conjunctivitis. Now, there can be a foreign body that is lodged, which is causing red eye because of constant irritation, or you can just see the dilated conjunctival blood vessels. The blood vessels can be conjunctival or episcleral. Most important thing is if you're seeing the discharge. So discharge tells us that it could be a conjunctivitis. Again, we divide this depending on the type of discharge. Or typically you can see a corneal ulcer which is there. Association of a corneal ulcer or an iridocyclitis can be there with a hypopyon. Now, the ulcer itself can be a bacterial ulcer or a fungal or dendritic ulcer, or there could be dilated episcleral vessels. So in the history, it is very important to know these points. What is the duration of onset of symptoms? Whether it is sudden or it is chronic. It can be sudden as in a case of trauma, or it can be chronic in a long-standing chronic iridocyclitis. You have to ask about the type of discharge for differentiating the type of infected conjunctivitis, or any particular case, there are many reasons why it could be a unilateral or bilateral. So this will also help you to know which kind of infection or allergy or what is the cause. It can be there in the eye. Ask for any history of any precipitating event like trauma to the eye or use of contact lenses, which itself can precipitate an allergic conjunctivitis. Already a known case of allergic history, the patient then helps us more in favor of an allergic conjunctivitis. So examination, whenever you're seeing a patient of red eye, you examine the patient or inspect the patient as a whole. Look at the face, look at the lesions over the skin, or look at if the patient is having any herpetic vesicles or the patient is having herpes zoster. You can see multiple lesions involving one particular dermatome of the face. So that you can see. Then examine the conjunctiva, examine the cornea, anterior chamber, the lens and fundus. All of this will help you in clinching the diagnosis. Now, we'll move forward with conjunctiva first. Here you're seeing there is congestion in the eyes. Mostly it is the conjunctiva that is involved. So the type of conjunctival infections could be infective or allergic or traumatic. So the infective again are divided as bacterial, viral and allergic. In all these conjunctival infections or probably the conjunctival reactions, you can say, the most important thing is redness. As you're seeing here, redness will be there. If it is an infective conjunctivitis, then there will be discharge. If it is an allergic conjunctivitis, the main symptom that the patient will come to you will be with itching. And this will be for a long time, and allergic will be present in both eyes. So now depending on discharge, how do you classify conjunctivitis is? Bacterial conjunctivitis will have a mucopurulent discharge. It will be a very thick and sticky secretion wherein you can see the additions of the eyelashes together. So this is a very characteristic of the presence of a bacterial conjunctivitis, that is the mucopurulent discharge, which in fact you'll be able to see even after the patient wipes it off before coming to you, because it keeps releasing timely. Next is viral. The viral infection, you'll see a watery discharge. If you check the palpebral conjunctiva, you will find follicles. So basically a watery discharge and the patient is having follicles, that gives you the presence of a viral conjunctivitis. This might be associated with systemic symptoms, like the patient may have fever or may have some amount of pain in the preauricular region because of the involvement of the lymph nodes in that particular area. Now, if the patient has allergy, mostly the allergy conditions will be bilateral and it will be a long-standing case. It will not be an acute case. Patient will give you a history of recurrent attacks, and the discharge will be a ropey discharge. Ropey is nothing but the discharge is like a thread. It keeps on coming as you keep on removing the discharge, and there will be association of papillae. So if you are seeing this picture, when there is congestion, here in this corner you can see the presence of mucoid discharge. Here you can see, because of the mucoid discharge, there is matting of the eyelashes. All this goes more in favor of bacterial conjunctivitis. In this particular picture, you can see follicles which are present here. The discharge is not typically mucoid. This patient had watery discharge, and there is follicles present in his particular eye in the palpebral conjunctiva, probably with systemic symptoms like fever, which may be there or which may not be there, depending on the aggression of the virus. So preauricular lymphadenopathy can be present in few cases. That will also be helpful. Now, allergic conjunctivitis per se will always have palpebral features. It might be the presence of papillae, which might be very acute, like here you're seeing very big papillae, which are red and congested palpebral conjunctiva with big papillae. You can see these papillae are all flat topped, whereas the follicles will be raised lesions. And because of this long-standing allergy, there will be changes present in the palpebral conjunctiva. So now, another specific thing I would like to mention here is about VKC. All of you know about VKC. The age group here is one thing which helps us in moving towards the diagnosis. VKC is more common in the younger age group. That is mostly in the first decade, maximum up to the second decade. It is a self-limiting condition. After the second decade, it usually disappears. Here, the presentation can be in two types. One is it can be in the bulbar conjunctiva as limbal form, or in the palpebral conjunctiva. So when it is involving the limbal or the bulbar conjunctiva, you can see basically the presence of mucoid nodules here. These are called as Trantha spots. So the presence of a circular ring around the limbus with the elevated gelatinous nodules here will tell you that it is a Horner Trantha spots, which is seen in VKC. Most important in VKC is the age group. You cannot diagnose VKC in a 30-year-old adult. It's always in the first decade or in maximum up to the second decade. Here you can see the big size papillae which are seen in VKC called as giant papillae. If the patient has been suffering with VKC for a longer time, the papillae will increase in size from 0.2 to 2 millimeter to almost up to 0.5 mm. So at that time you call it as giant papillae. So the presence of giant papillae indicates a chronic problem. So these two things will tell you that it is a VKC. Now, how do you treat all these cases? If it is a bacterial conjunctivitis, then you have to give the patient antibiotic eye drops and the ointment to take care of the bacterial infection. Viral conjunctivitis, we don't give antiviral therapy for conjunctivitis. Basically, the treatment is supportive treatment. The hygiene of the eye should be taken care of, and the patient should be, if the patient is having any fever, then you can give a paracetamol. Sometimes the conjunctivitis resolves after a period of 1 week. Whereas allergic conjunctivitis, depending on the severity of allergic conjunctivitis, we start the treatment. If the patient is having mild allergy, an antihistaminic will be sufficient. Depending on the presence of a long-term allergy which is not subsiding, you can go for a mast cell stabilizer. If the patient is presenting with acute symptoms, then you might have to start a low-dose steroid eye drops. So this, always remember, the steroid eye drops will have to be tapered. So a mild differentiation between bacterial, viral and allergic is bilateral involvement. It tells you that it is mostly allergic, whereas 50% of the cases of bacterial, because of the presence of the mucoid discharge, once the patient touches his hands to the other eye will get involved. Viral is not prevalent in both eyes. Most probably it will be a unilateral presentation. Discharge is very important, the type of discharge. Mucopurulent discharge is seen in case of bacterial. Watery discharge is seen in case of viral. And discharge is not seen mostly in case of allergic conjunctivitis. So itching is another important symptom which is present only in allergic conjunctivitis. Now, we will look at another conjunctival pathology wherein there is redness, but you do not have any discharge. The patient comes to you with sudden onset of redness. So you're seeing a big patch of red area within the eye, whereas the other part of the eye is normal. So what is more important in this cases is you have to ask for history of trauma. Is trauma the cause of this subconjunctival hemorrhage? The patient will not have pain in this particular condition, but he'll be alarmed with the amount of redness his eyes are showing. So the moment he gets this much of amount of redness, he comes to you. You have to ask about any history of trauma. Patients who are having hypertension, suddenly the small conjunctival blood vessels might rupture basically on its own, or during a continuous bout of cough or sudden sneezing. All this can also cause subconjunctival hemorrhage. Sometimes it is without any reason, that is, it is idiopathic. So history of trauma is important, diabetes and hypertension is important, and remember it is a sudden onset of redness. You will see that the patient did not have the symptoms previous day. He tells you that suddenly on waking up, he found that his eye was red. And most importantly, it is painless. The most important thing in subconjunctival hemorrhage is you have to look for the posterior limit. As in this particular picture, this is the anterior limit of the subconjunctival hemorrhage, and this is the posterior limit. You're seeing that the posterior limit is clearly seen. Beyond that, the area is white. That means it is a localized hemorrhage. Supposing it is a retrobulbar hemorrhage, which is continuous in cases of trauma of the basal floor or of the base of the skull, then this will be it will be bilateral and it will be continuous, wherein you cannot visualize the posterior limit of the subconjunctival hemorrhage. A subconjunctival hemorrhage can be given as a short case to you. So whenever you're getting a case of subconjunctival hemorrhage, look for the posterior limit. So if that is clearly seen, then you can reassure that to the patient that it will subside on its own and it is not harmful. Basically, it takes time, about 3 to 4 weeks time, during which period the blood resolves on its own. You can give a vitamin C tablet to the patient. Now, moving on to cornea. Many corneal lesions can cause red eye. Anything which ranges from a mild abrasion or the presence of a foreign body, or the most vast commonly found infection in the cornea, that is the keratitis, can cause a red eye. Any corneal pathology will have these symptoms. The patient will have redness and pain. Pain is an important feature. Photophobia is a very important feature of corneal infections. Corneal infections, because of the presence of the abundant supply of nerve, the corneal nerves, the patient will have pain along with photophobia and watering. So now here you see a lesion wherein you are seeing multiple scratches on the cornea. These scratches on the cornea are nothing but abrasion on the cornea. Usually these kind of scratches are caused by the presence of any foreign body. When you're seeing this particular picture on examining the patient, you have to check the lids. Underneath, you have to invert the lid and see if there are any foreign body lodged in the subtarsal conjunctiva or not. Because when the patient is closing his eyes, that particular foreign body will rub the cornea and will cause this type of clinical picture. So always stain the patient with fluorescein if you are doubtful about a corneal lesion. Sometimes visualization directly will probably miss any abrasion which is smaller in size. So always stain the patient and check for any abrasion. Presence of foreign body is very important. A foreign body lodged in the cornea or within the lids can cause a lot of irritation. So that has to be removed. And corneal ulcer will have to treat corneal ulcer. So we'll just see. Most of the patients of corneal abrasion or corneal pathology, they will give you history of trauma or a fall of foreign body. Always look for foreign body. It is better to exclude a foreign body rather than just leave it within the eye. Always look and stain with the fluorescein to help you diagnose. So this type of lesion you will not be able to visualize because the cornea is transparent. Unless it has inflammation or infection with hypopyon and all, probably you will miss this type of epithelial defect. So it is better to stain with fluorescein and see this. In this particular eye, you can see a brown color foreign body. The most common corneal foreign body is, we see it when the patient is doing some welding work. The iron chips, they fall off and they get stuck onto the cornea. So whenever you're seeing this type of picture, you have to remove the foreign body, start the patient on antibiotic eye drops, and because of the amount of pain it causes, there'll be ciliary spasm and there'll be pain. So always give a cycloplegic. Now, corneal ulcers, you have learnt in detail, you have been taught about it. I'll not go into the details of the corneal ulcer, but the type of corneal ulcer, the picture will help you in diagnosing what type of corneal ulcer it is. It could be a viral ulcer with a dendritic pattern, or it could be a bacterial ulcer, and you can see a hypopyon. In the fungal ulcers, you'll see a dry ulcer with rolled out edges, and you will see feathery margins and satellite lesions. So all these findings help us to diagnose the condition. A corneal ulcer you'll be able to identify, but the most important thing is to classify what type of ulcer it is. So depending on clinical findings, depending on corneal sensations, if the corneal sensations are diminished, we say it is a viral ulcer. If you are able to see the dendritic margins of the ulcer very clearly. So that is one thing which goes in favor of viral ulcer. Now, if you're seeing an ulcer with round edges and it is localized in one particular area, then probably it is a bacterial ulcer. And anyways, in any case, you have to scrape the material from the corneal base and the edge of the ulcer. That will help you. You give it for a 10% KOH or gram stain. KOH, the results will come out within 10 minutes. If it is positive, then definitely it is a fungal ulcer. You can start with the treatment of fungal ulcer. No, if the KOH treatment stain comes out negative, then probably it is a bacterial ulcer, unless it fits into the typical characteristics of the viral ulcer. So depending on your clinical findings and your systemic examination, you will decide the type of ulcer and you'll start the treatment accordingly. So the corneal ulcers can be basically the infective types or non-infective types. Infective types we have dealt with. Non-infective types could be due to a chronic trauma or neurological problems, wherein there will be a delay in the wound healing, or it could be an immunological problem. So at the end of it all, the treatment of the corneal ulcer will be either the non-specific, you have to go for a non-specific treatment or supportive treatment. Cycloplegics is a must because the patient comes to you mainly because of pain. The pain will be intense in severity, so you definitely have to give a cycloplegic and an NSAID. And then, depending on your diagnosis and classification of the ulcer, you have to start. Depending if it is a bacterial, then go for an antibacterial or antiviral or antifungal treatment. Now, moving on from conjunctiva and cornea, now coming to sclera. The scleral involvement can also present with red eye. So here, how do you differentiate between a conjunctival and scleral involvement is the position will be, the congestion will be a little dark red in color because the conjunctiva is superficial, it will be bright red, whereas scleral congestions will be dark red in color. In sclera also, the involvement can be of the episcleral tissue or the scleral tissue proper. Depending on that, we classify again as episcleritis and scleritis. Basically, episcleritis is only inflammation of episclera, whereas scleritis is inflammation of the sclera. So how do you differentiate between these both is, episcleritis is usually localized. Sometimes it can be diffuse, definitely, but it is a temporary problem. The patient will not have chronic episodes or recurrent episodes, whereas in a case of scleritis, the patient will have recurrent episodes and there will always be a predisposing factor. Predisposing factors here are, it is usually autoimmune in origin. So patients with immunological problems or rheumatological problems like rheumatoid arthritis being one of the common reasons. So you have to investigate for any HLA-B27 problem, or the patient is having rheumatoid arthritis. So you have to investigate for the immunological reasons in case of scleritis. And scleritis, because of the scleral tissue involvement, it will be intensely painful. Episcleritis will have some moderate amount of discomfort, but scleritis will be severely painful. It is described in books that it is a pain which wakes up the patient from his sleep. So the intensity is so much that it is not relieved by sleeping also. So you have to start the treatment in scleritis. These are the other pictures of scleritis. Why we are more worried about scleritis is, see, here in episcleritis and scleritis, again, we can differentiate depending on their position and involvement. Here I said the congestion is a little superficial. Here the congestion will be deep. Here, because the sclera is involved, you will see a raised lesion. The scleral tissue is like bulged. It is moved forward or it is bulged. It can be either a nodular scleritis involving one particular area, or it can be a diffuse scleritis. It can be necrotizing, wherein necrosis can take place, or non-necrotizing type. There are many types. We'll see it later on. Here, these are the pictures of scleritis. Here it is a diffuse scleritis wherein the scleral tissue is raised. This is superior scleritis. Long-standing scleritis, the patient will develop scleral thinning. Here what you're seeing, this blue region, is because of the scleral thinning, you're seeing the underlying uveal tissue. That's why this appears as if having a bluish discoloration. But basically the pathology here is the sclera is thinned out. Long-standing cases of scleritis, the patient might end up in hysis bulbi also because of the disintegration. So the basic points to remember between episcleritis and scleritis is episcleritis localized and it occurs at younger age. Scleritis is mainly a disease of elder age with systemic associations like rheumatoid arthritis. As I said, severe pain is typical in case of scleritis. So the treatment here is directed at the cause. You have to give topical steroids and also systemic steroids here to treat the condition. Whereas in case of episcleritis, you will give topical steroids and NSAIDs. Now, so moving on to the inside layers, we'll see how iris and ciliary body lesions will present as red eye. All of you know that iritis or cyclitis, that is iridocyclitis, can cause a circumciliary congestion. So this will have the circumciliary congestion and it will have all the features of iridocyclitis involving the layers of the iris, corneal capes. We'll just see. The symptoms will be, in case of iridocyclitis, the patient will come to you with pain, redness and photophobia. Associated watering is also present. If the uveitis is limited to the anterior chamber or anterior segment, then the patient will present with these features. If the posterior segment is involved, then floaters can also be present. Now, these are the signs. The patient presents with circumcorneal congestion and you can see keratic precipitates. Can anybody tell me what type of KPs are seen here in this particular picture? Students, one of you please respond. What are the type of KPs you're seeing here? Are you able to hear me? What are the types of KPs that you're seeing here? Yes? What are these round big KPs that you're seeing here? What do you call them? See, at least one of you has to answer so that we can move on.
Fine pigmented KPs.
See, here it is not pigmented. These are white and round, big size KPs. So these are mutton fat KPs, okay? And is occupying almost entire part of the cornea. It is not basically remitted. So this is basically a granulomatous uveitis. When you are seeing a big, large, round KPs. Thank you for responding. Okay. So the patient will have keratic precipitates. And the most clinching diagnosis here is, apart from the KPs, the presence of cells and flare in the anterior chamber. So you have to specifically look for the cells and flare. That will be more easily visualized when you do a magnification. Magnify and put a small size slit beam. Then you'll be able to visualize the cells and flare. And because of the chronic irritation of the iris, posterior synechia develop between the posterior surface of the iris and the anterior capsule. So because of development of posterior synechia, the anterior chamber can become irregular in shape and the pupil will become irregular pupil. So when you are dilating, you'll get a typical festoon pupil. In the early stages, it could be a constriction of the pupil because of irritation of the iris, that is meiosis will be there, but later on stages, festoon pupil can be seen. The treatment. Coming to the treatment part, most important part of iridocyclitis or uveitis is the patient has to be treated with topical steroids along with cycloplegics and NSAIDs. This is the supportive therapy, but most important is you have to look for the specific cause. What is the cause? Most common causes could be, like in our country, tuberculosis is one of the common cause. So you have to write a few investigations to the patient. If it is a single episode and it is unilateral, then you can leave it. But if the patient has bilateral involvement or recurrent episodes, or the patient has a granulomatous uveitis, then you can go for investigations. Depending on what type of pathology you find in the investigation, you have to start the treatment. It could be either tubercular pathology, it could be either syphilis or HIV. Now, after covering the iris and ciliary body, let us see how glaucoma can cause a red eye. As you all know, a patient of glaucoma classified as open angle or angle closure. In both of these, the presentation is varied. Open angle glaucoma is a chronic and slow progressing disorder wherein the patient doesn't know the symptoms. Whereas in a case of narrow angle glaucoma, the patient might present with a sudden attack of acute congestive glaucoma. So what happens here is the angle which is already shallow suddenly gets blocked, and the patient will arrive to you in this particular presentation. So there will be circumcorneal congestion will be there. How do you differentiate this from the others is, here you don't see any KPs. In iritis also you will see circumcorneal congestion, but here you do not see KPs, and most importantly, there will be corneal edema here. So you see a hazy cornea, and clinching diagnosis will be for you is the IOP is very high. So if you're seeing a high IOP with corneal edema, circumcorneal congestion, then it could be narrow angles. In particular, it could be an acute congestive glaucoma. So the patient will be in very severe pain because the intraocular pressure raises to something above 40. The patient will have a sudden rapid rise in intraocular pressure. So this rapid change will cause severe pain in the eye, so much to the extent that the patient develops severe pain along with nausea, vomiting, and a lot of headache. So sometimes what happens is these patients will land up with a physician complaining of pain and headache. If you ask the patient in particular for the symptoms, the patient will tell you that he's able to see some colored halos around the bulbs or around the lights. And over a period of time, this will be progressive blurring. But because it is a severe pain, you have to keep in mind, depending on the intraocular pressure, that it could be acute primary angle closure glaucoma. So these are the features that you see when you're seeing a patient. The lids are edematous, and here you can see conjunctival and ciliary congestion both are there. Cornea is edematous. A lot of edema will be there in the cornea. AC is shallow. Iris discoloration, or because of the acute rise of pressure, there will be ischemia in certain parts of the iris with atrophy. And the pupil in these cases will be mid-dilated. That is because a small constricted pupil, the iris is a little away from the angle. But when the patient's pupil is mid-dilated, the iris gets rolled up in the angle, and this particular position is more dangerous than a totally dilated pupil. In this particular position, the angle is totally blocked. So the patient pupil, when he comes to you with acute angle closure, will be a mid-dilated, vertically oval and fixed pupil. This does not react to light. So this is another important feature. IOP is markedly elevated and the angles are closed. So if you look at the disc, because of sudden intraocular pressure, it could be hyperemic and swollen. So now our main purpose is, this is a vision or sight-threatening condition can happen if you do not reduce the pressure, because a sudden onset increase of intraocular pressure about from 40 to 50 can cause pressure on the optic nerve, and it can cause an optic atrophy. So you have to basically prevent this from happening. So most important treatment here is decreasing the intraocular pressure. First thing you go for systemic hyperosmotic agents like IV mannitol. This causes a sudden fall in pressure. So the intraocular pressure comes down very rapidly. So this is the mannitol is the thing which we use more commonly because it decreases the volume. It absorbs volume from the spaces, from the vitreous. So the vitreous volume shrinks, vitreous will shrink, and the AC will be becomes a little deeper so that the angle opens. So this will help you to bring about the intraocular pressure from. So if the intraocular pressure is above 50, go for mannitol. If it is somewhere around 30, go for systemic Dimox or acetazolamide 500 mg. Why we are giving systemic treatment and not topical treatment here is very important, because the topical medications, they have to get absorbed through the cornea. Now, because of the intraocular pressure, there is a lot of corneal edema, so your topical medications will not be able to enter the eye. So first you have to clear the corneal edema using the systemic treatment, and then you have to follow it up with local treatment. You can give beta blocker for decreasing the intraocular pressure, and steroids is important, topical steroids. Though it is a case of acute attack of glaucoma, we are giving steroids is basically to reduce the inflammation within the anterior chamber. So if the inflammation decreases, then your angles will be free. They'll not be blocked by the because of the presence of the inflammation. The inflammatory cells might block. So you have to give steroids to clear that blockage. After this, once you have managed an episode of acute attack of primary angle closure glaucoma, the matter doesn't end here. You have to give the treatment. to the fellow eye as well, because anatomically both eyes are similar. So you can instill first pilocarpine drops to the patient in the other eye and do a prophylactic laser iridotomy. Once the corneal edema clears in the particular eye which the patient has come, here also you have to go for the treatment of laser iridotomy. So all cases of angle closure glaucoma, the basic mechanism is because of the closed angles. So you have to make the angles deep once you have controlled the intraocular pressure. So that is why you have to go for a laser iridotomy in both the eyes. Now, we'll see the lesions of the lid. Sometimes the lesions of the lid can also cause a dry eye. Here you're seeing a hordeolum externum that is seen here, that is a stye, which can cause red eye. Sometimes blepharitis or meibomitis. What happens in these conditions is, because of the secretion of the meibomian secretions or the sebum, it goes into the eye and it causes irritation. So because of the irritation of the conjunctiva, so because of the secretions, there will be red eye in cases of meibomitis and also in hordeolum externum. So depending on the pathology, whether it's a hordeolum externum or blepharitis, you have to start the treatment. Basically, in all these things, lid hygiene is very important. You have to tell the patient about lid hygiene. Hot fomentation is very helpful, along with topical antibiotics. Topical antibiotics in the form of ointment will be more useful in these conditions rather than the presence of topical eye drops. So prescribe topical antibiotic ointments and give warm compresses. The warm compresses basically relieve the pathology by liquefying the meibomian secretions. The thickened secretions will cause you hordeolum internum, or infection near the eyelash will cause hordeolum externum. In meibomitis also, the sebum is thickened. So because of the warm compresses or hot fomentation, it is liquefied, and then your treatment will be more effective. Now, having dealt with all the other pathologies of the eye, we'll come to the most dangerous ones. These are endophthalmitis, panophthalmitis, and orbital cellulitis. So now, how do you differentiate between all of this? Endophthalmitis, all of you know, is a dreaded complication. It can occur spontaneously by any exogenous mechanism or post-operatively after cataract surgery or any glaucoma surgery. So how do you differentiate between endophthalmitis and panophthalmitis? Basically, endophthalmitis is infection within the cavities. Cavities means, the anterior chamber and the vitreous chamber. So vitreous cavity and the anterior chamber are basically filled with pus. It is an exaggeration of the uveitis, wherein the entire anterior chamber becomes filled with pus. The patient has conjunctival congestion. Because of the presence of the infection, cornea becomes very hazy and it starts melting. There'll be a lot of accumulation of hypopyon in the anterior chamber. Vitreous cavity is filled with cells, and ultimately the patient will present you with vision loss. Why these three are important? Or these are vision-threatening complications, wherein you see red eye. So you have to be aware of these particular conditions. One is endophthalmitis, wherein the cavities are involved, that is the anterior chamber and vitreous cavity. When this infection crosses the cavities and enters into the scleral tissue, when it is extending outside of the cavities, then you call it as panophthalmitis. So basically, how to differentiate between these two is, panophthalmitis, it involves the tissues around the eye. That is, apart from the cavities, even the sclera and the conjunctival tissues are involved. So the patient will have movement whenever you are checking for the extraocular movements, there will be pain. So the patient complains of pain with extraocular movements, and the vision is also reduced. In both the conditions, in panophthalmitis, vision becomes the patient will have no perception of light, whereas in endophthalmitis, the patient can still have counting fingers 1 meter to hand movement and even perception of light, but definitely not better than that. Panophthalmitis, the patient will lose the vision completely. So depending on the vision, you again discriminate between these two and the extraocular movement. So this is how it is essential to know these conditions. Now, orbital cellulitis, this is also a vision-threatening complication, which can become a life-threatening complication. So we'll see this a little in detail. Always remember, when you are seeing a patient with this much amount of lid inflammation, edema, and proptosis, you can see the conjunctiva is chemosed and it is coming out. The patient will have systemic symptoms. The patient will have fever with chills, and a lot of pain will be there. So all these things will point out towards an orbital cellulitis. Initially, the patient may come to you with a preseptal cellulitis wherein there is only edema in the anterior part of the eye, anterior part of the lid. When the inflammation crosses the orbital septum, then it is called as orbital cellulitis. So the infection progresses into the orbital cavity. So when this happens, the patient can lose vision. So it is an emergency sight-threatening complication because of the presence of infection in the orbital cavity, there is every chance that the optic nerve can get compressed. So the patient comes to you with a lot of pain. When so much of inflammation is present, there is no space. So all this tightening will cause a lot of pain. There will be proptosis, there is chemosis, and definitely there is decreased vision. So what are you supposed to do in this particular scenario? As we said, it is an emergency. So you have to treat it like an emergency. Because if you don't treat it as an emergency, not only will the patient lose his vision, there is a chance that the patient might lose his life. How? Because the orbital cellulitis, the venous drainage is connected to the cavernous sinus. So it can spread from the orbital cavity into the cavernous sinus and then into the sagittal sinus. So it can cause thrombosis in the cavernous sinus or into the sagittal sinus. So in that particular cases, it becomes life-threatening. So before that happens, control the infection or manage the patient very aggressively. You always have to give systemic or IV antibiotics. This patient always has to get admitted. So admit the patient, that is very important. Give him immediately IV systemic antibiotics and monitor the patient very closely. You have to do the investigations to rule out any involvement of the cavernous sinus. That is, CT scan should be done. Imaging of the head and neck should be done to rule out infection in the orbital cavity extending to the sagittal sinus or the cavernous sinus. Patient will have acute pain, so analgesics are also given systemically. Now, after knowing all the things which can cause a red eye, here comes the most important part, that is the important questions what you are supposed to know. So the important question is, first thing you see, is the vision affected? Now, you have seen in the last three conditions I have shown you where the vision is affected and where it is threatening. Vision is affected mildly or it is threatening. Any corneal involvement, the vision will be affected definitely. But vision threatening conditions are like acute congestive glaucoma or your orbital cellulitis or endophthalmitis. So these are vision threatening conditions. You have to check whether it is unilateral or bilateral. In the beginning, we have seen unilateral cases like in viral conjunctivitis or bilateral in allergic conjunctivitis, or you can see a unilateral iridocyclitis or a bilateral iridocyclitis, which is chronic. Unilateral can be again orbital cellulitis when it has spread to the cavernous sinus. From there, it goes on to the other eye. It becomes bilateral. That is also more dangerous. So you have to check whether it is a painful condition or painless condition. So we'll see all this. And most importantly, what are the associated signs and symptoms? So we'll look at this. First, we'll just classify this a little bit so that it becomes a little easier. First, we are looking at a red eye, which is having almost normal or near to normal. Normal is almost 6.6 or near to normal is 6.9 or maybe 6.12 also. We'll consider this not very severely affected vision. So in this type of red eye, what could be the causes? Now next thing what you have to see is, this type of red eye, is it painless or it is painful? When a red eye with a normal vision, it is painless, most commonly you see a subconjunctival hemorrhage. Or it is some amount of pain which the patient complains to you of discomfort. They normally use the terms like there is some discomfort, like in Hindi they say kuch chub raha hai or they say kuch kuntundi, something like that. So some amount of discomfort and the presence of discharge will tell you that it is conjunctivitis. So a totally painless condition will be subconjunctival hemorrhage. Mild discomfort but a lot of discharge will tell you conjunctivitis. Now, we will see red eye with pain. What are the conditions which can cause red eye with pain? So it can be, again here I'm not considering here I'm considering only normal vision. Pain, but still the vision is normal. It's not very severely affected, or it could be up to 6.12. These conditions are episcleritis, scleritis, and uveitis. So how do you differentiate? You can see the episcleritis or scleritis involvement of the outer layers, whereas uveitis, your anterior chamber with the typical signs and symptoms will be present. So that is how you can come to a particular diagnosis. Now, conditions wherein red eye is with an impaired vision. So this impaired vision can be either with a normal IOP or a raised IOP. Normal intraocular pressure is, you can have any corneal pathology, like even a small corneal abrasion or corneal ulcer. Your anterior uveitis will have a normal intraocular pressure, but it will be having pain, and definitely there will be a decrease in vision. Then endophthalmitis. Here the vision is severely affected, but still your intraocular pressure is normal. Vision is severely affected, there is a chance that the patient might lose his vision. We've also discussed about panophthalmitis, wherein the patient has already lost the vision. So now decreased vision, redness and pain with high intraocular pressure, then it goes in favor of acute angle closure glaucoma. How do you know it is acute angle closure? One thing is very severe pain with nausea and vomiting. IOP is the most important factor here, almost more than 50, or at least it will be above 40. Pupil is fixed and dilated, and it is typically vertically oval in shape. This type of pain is precipitated by darkness, that is usually during the night times or whenever there is a mydriasis. It can happen even in your OPD when you are actually dilating a patient without looking at the anterior chamber properly. If you have not checked that the anterior chamber is shallow and you have dilated, then also the patient might land up in those who are prone, they can land up in acute attack of angle closure glaucoma. So the patient, because of the high intraocular pressure, definitely the patient will have corneal edema. That's why his cornea will be very hazy and the vision will be decreased. Decreased, as of now, the patient might present to you with 660, but if you don't treat, this patient will lose vision. It can even go up to PL negative. So act as an emergency in these conditions, bring down the IOP and treat the cause. So I'll end the class here. If you have any doubts, you can ask me. So for you to diagnose, look at the main features: redness, vision, and pain. So these are the three things that you need to see. So if it is painless, think of course, depending on the symptoms and signs what you're seeing. If it is a subconjunctival hemorrhage, don't forget to see the posterior limit. If it is discharge, try to look at the discharge, what type of discharge is it, so that you can classify it as which type of conjunctivitis it is. Then again, these are the features with pain. Always painful eyes and red eyes can be these things. Impaired vision is definitely important for all of us. We should understand which is life-threatening and which is sight-threatening. Orbital cellulitis is definitely life-threatening. You have to act as an emergency, and you have to do imaging also. Here, normal intraocular pressures are seen in this condition, whereas raised intraocular pressure is in a case of acute attack of angle closure glaucoma. So, would you like to ask any doubts, or shall we end the class here? Please respond so that I can understand. Anybody has any doubts? Yes, students, if you do not have any doubts, then we'll end the class here. Can you hear me? Okay, then we'll end the class here. Thank you.